anyways, we have Abhishek Basumallick to talk about a lot of that. And Abhishek, let me speak with you about a space which is in focus for a variety of reasons. And we'll also get a big exclusive news break very shortly by my colleague on that is Telecom. Now, Reliance, which is almost a third of Telecom, is at life highs. Bharati is at life highs, almost nudging the 700 mark. And idea pretty much, it's difficult to have an idea fundamentally. So it's very volatile also last couple of days. But how do you see the way commentary from Bharati Mittal came on tariffs, the way data consumption in the country is surging? And now we are also almost talking about how the 2G area will also get transformed once Reliance starts its new phones over there, launches them. It is also important because a huge amount of debt is owed to the banks. So health of the third player is important. Your thoughts there?
So first of all, thanks Sajay for having me on your show. I think, like you mentioned, telecom is a sector which is very important for the country overall, right? So as a country, we need maybe 3+1, 4 players to be there in the market. And I think the market is also sort of factoring that in. Nobody thinks that idea, is going to go completely off the radar. But having said that, the bulk of the market share is going to reside between Bharti and Reliance. But the trend for the sector overall for the next many years is going to be positive because there is going to be huge data consumption, and it's sort of a self-fulfilling loop. The more data you consume, the more need you have for more and more data. So if you remember, say a few years back, very few people were using mobiles for data, right? People were using it for calls, SMS and things like that. Now the consumption pattern has completely changed to audio, video, things like that. So and that has become all pervasive. It is not that it is only happening in pockets, but if you go down to the villages, to the tier 2, tier 3 cities, to the top tier cities, everywhere data consumption has boomed. Now, obviously, there is always going to be a challenge in terms of tariff raises, and like you also mentioned, like there are downstream impact of the telecom sector on banks and other their lenders and things like that. So it's a very crucial sector. It's something that as a country we need to
Right.
we need the sector to perform well, and
Sure.
the long-term
Abhishek,
future.
very good. Right. Let me come in over there, Abhishek, on that line of yours that we clearly need the sector. It's an important one. And even the regulators and policymakers are looking at it very importantly, or closely, I would say. And my colleague Nayanthara Rai now is joining us with exclusive details on what she's gathering on, which could really impact the space. Nayanthara, tell us, what do you gather exclusively today?
It's an ET9 exclusive where we would like to inform our viewers that the cabinet note, according to sources that has been prepared for the telecom sector, has no big relief measures for the telecom companies. Retrospectively, there will be no cut in spectrum usage charge, there will be no cut in AGR, there will be no cut in any of the other government levies. So that at the outset is the most important thing that the markets need to know. It's the way the government is thinking. It wants to protect its net present value when it comes with respect to the exposure to telecom companies. So what is on the anvil? The Supreme Court verdict that had upheld the AGR dues, adjusted gross revenues with penalty interest, there will be no change in the calculation of that, but it has to be payable in 10 years. What the government is looking at, and we understand from our sources in the cabinet note, is to defer payments for 4 years. But that's just a deferment. It doesn't mean it's going anywhere. There's no waiver, etc. It will have to be made up in equal installments in the subsequent 5 years. So it's basically some relief that can come in for making the payments for 4 years, but it will have to be then made up in equal installments in the subsequent 5 years. That's something very important to note. So like I said, no extension in the timeline, no recalculation of the dues, this and that. Spectrum usage charge. A lot has been said. Can't the government cut spectrum usage charge? This will also come as a disappointment to the industry, which is that retrospectively, the spectrum usage charge is going nowhere. Prospectively, for future auctions, it can indeed be passed on. There's been a lot that has been said about will the government convert any of the dues, take it in lieu of equity? Will there be an equity conversion? What we are understanding from our sources is that telecom companies can convert additional interest on account of moratorium into equity. We understand the cabinet note actually explains that by quantifying numbers in the annexures, which our sources tell us is that you're talking about an additional interest of approximately 16,500 crores for Vodafone Idea, 9,500 crores for Bharati Airtel, and 3,000 crore rupees for Jio. If Vodafone Idea does indeed exercise the option, let's say 10 rupees a share, it's going to mean 1,600 new shares. But that basically means is free float is going to go up by 50%. You're talking about a 50% dilution is the other way to really look at it. And sources telling us that the modalities of this will finally have to be decided by SEBI, DOT, as well as the Finance Ministry. It's indeed going to be a very challenging one. But what the markets will want to know, tomorrow's cabinet meet, if you do see this cabinet note being passed by the cabinet, what kind of relief are you talking about for the sector? Nothing retrospective. Everything will be prospective. And even in that, with the AGR dues, which is about 60,000 crores that Vodafone Idea has to pay, deferment for 4 years on the amount, but it'll have to be made up in equal installments in the subsequent 5 years to meet that 10-year deadline of the Supreme Court.
Thanks very much for that breaking news and exclusive details, Nentara. So Nentara Rai, my colleague, was breaking out what to expect from the cabinet note, and it's an important one because there is a lot of expectation in the market. Abhishek Basumallick is still with us. Abhishek, let's move on. We got your views on the telecom space and what are the monitorables, but in your portfolio, what's the approach here? How are you maintaining your portfolios? Have you made any changes to your framework recently, or anything you're researching?
So I think, couple of areas that we should be looking at. One, obviously, I've spoken about with you earlier also is the chemicals space. I keep saying this, that chemicals is in a spot today where probably IT was in the early 2000 period. So it's a long structural, secular, story that is playing out, and it's likely to play out over, a significant amount of time. And it's not something that is just happening today because of the China plus one kind of movement. It's been a structural story for the last maybe at least half a decade or a little bit more than that. So chemicals is a good place to look at. Another very interesting place, although a lot of the stocks have run up, is IT. And within IT, if you specifically look at companies which are working on the banking and the financial sector as clients. The reason I say that is, if you look around you, there is a huge amount of disruption happening with the fintech and the neo banks that are coming up, right? And you've also done stories on that. So that is going to push the traditional banks into upgrading their softwares, upgrading their systems. And that is where a lot of these banking, financial focused IT companies, especially ones who are doing some niche work in those areas, could actually benefit over the next few years. So that's another interesting space. Real estate looks again, it's coming out of the woods after many years. So that's another very interesting space. And obviously, if real estate does well, it has
Abhishek,
a fallout on
estate,
other sectors.
Let me come in over here. We are getting a real estate company, Ajmer Realty, on the other side of the break, and wanted to understand how are you playing the industries around real estate. Of course, directly one can always go for real estate stock, which are seeing good offtake in volumes, etc. But a lot of people are preferring ancillaries, which which kind of sectors or stocks do you like there?
Yeah, I think a perfect place to play the real estate would be two, three areas. One is the housing finance companies. Then you look at the sanitary ware, the ceramic tiles, those players. Paints is a difficult place because the valuations are slightly on the upper end, but those are something that you also be looked at. But these are the primary areas. Plywood, laminates, again, that is another good area to look at when you're looking at the real estate space. So broadly, if you focus on these three, four areas on the uptick of real estate, that should actually do well.
Before we take a break, thanks very much, Abhishek, for joining us.